Welcome to Thousand Trails, Lake of the Springs. Driving into Lake of the Springs seems like the longest drive. You'll pass a ranger station and you'll go past multiple RV loops and through an RV loop before you ever make it to the registration area. Now, when you're driving through, some of these, depending on the season, may be closed, which we found that the I loop and the D loop that is right when you enter was closed during the time that we were there. And when you drive through a loop, which you'll drive through the middle of to get to the registration area, there are deer everywhere. And it is the nicest greeting to pull into a campground and just see deer grazing amongst the RVs. And when you pull into the parking area of the registration office, I think you'll agree with me, it's one of the largest RV parking areas that I have seen in any campground. I think they could probably hold a good 15 campers as they're checking in. Now you'll notice in this video and the next that you will see me sitting in front of our RV instead of walking around the campground showing you guys the campground. Now what we did, because I was laid up, I had a knee injury. Dawn did walk around the campground, was able to film everything that you guys need to know because I couldn't walk around. So now you'll notice when you're at registration that they have a really nice general store. They have Lake of the Springs merch, basic RV and camping supplies, gifts, snacks, and they even have beer and wine. Also in this area is where you will find the laundromat and propane. However, while we were there, the laundromat really wasn't working. And when it does get back in order, make sure that you don't use pods. They don't want you using pods in their laundromat. They prefer that you use liquid. They said that the pods don't dissolve well. Now, I personally think the pods probably don't dissolve well because they do have some water issues, and I'll get into that later. Now there are two stations for propane, the one that's right there at the general store, and then the propane that is farther back at the front near the ranger station, which is much farther away. However, while we were there, we had to use the one that was further away because at that time the propane was not working at the one by the general store. And keep in mind, we were there sometime in February of 2025. Now let's talk about water issues. While we were staying here, we had to deal with not having water for an entire day. Evidently their cistern had emptied and they blamed it on some kids. They said, oh, we think that some kids pulled it so that all the water drained out. And when they said it because it had happened before, that they just assumed that it was kids doing it. So, of course, my response was like, oh, don't you want to put a lock on it? If it's happened before. But water really seems to be an issue at this campground. Now, let's talk about the amenities. Let's start with the one that confused me the most. They have a tiny, and I mean tiny little pond that is there for kids, and it says kids 15 and under can fish this little pond, but it was not stocked. I didn't see a single fish in that pond, and it is very, very small. And I don't know why they would have that when you could probably just fish off your kayak in the lake. Now, when you want to head up to the lounge, the Clubhouse, make sure that you don't ride a bike and you don't take a skateboard because there's a sign that says no bikes and no skateboards. This is a very, very large campground. So that really surprised me because it is very large and there's only limited parking if you decided to drive. So you have to either walk or drive. Those are your options. Now at the Clubhouse Lodge, when you first walk in, there's a very, very large room that almost looks like it's a dance floor. And in that room, there's a huge fireplace, a living room set where you can lounge by the fireplace, foosball table, a ping pong table. There is a little kids play area and a fun little Pac-Man game that you can play with your family and friends. Now there's another room that's just set aside for the pool tables, and there's 2 pool tables in there with a lounge area and a big TV that you can watch sports or a movie while you're also having your family there to play pool. When you go into the dining area, you will notice that it is very large. There's tons of seating. The time we were there in February, it was decorated for Valentine's Day. There's also a lounge area in there as well where you can cozy up and watch TV in there. They have a kitchen, so anytime that they're doing events or pancake breakfasts on the weekend, they can serve a lot of people. And there's even seating outside, out on the deck. Now you'll notice when you go out to the deck that there is a grill and a smoker, but that is for the kitchen and is not to be used by campers. Now, right outside down the hill from the lodge, if you're standing on the deck, you can see the lake and you can see the mini golf. Now, the mini golf area was in pretty rough shape. They weren't doing a great job of keeping leaves off, and I'm assuming that's because we were in off season. But I was really surprised because there were a lot of people staying at this campground for a campground in February. And having that would have been nice to be able to enjoy. Now, down the hill is the boat ramp, and you are allowed to take your bikes to get to the boat ramp. And you'll notice that there's a little shed here, and they rent out kayaks and canoes for you to be able to go out on the lake. Now, I'm not sure what the pricing is because at this time of year, it wasn't an amenity that was available, and they didn't have the prices listed. Now, there's a boat ramp here, so even if you bring your own kayaks and your own canoes, you can just pop on down there and get in the water. You'll see a sign that says no dogs, but that's okay because Lake of the Springs has a dog beach all to itself, which is a great, great thing, I think, to have at any lake campground. Now from here, you can kind of look off and see the dam and the public beach or the campground beach that's very large. And I'll be sure to show that to you shortly. Now you notice we did take a picture of the sign that said Swimmer's Itch. Now, Swimmer's Itch, if you have not heard of it before, it's caused because of a parasite. And that parasite comes from stuff like duck's poop. And what happens is there's ducks in the lake and they poop, and then that poop goes down into the soil and snails eat it. And then that creates the parasites. And those parasites can bore into your skin, and because they can't live on a human, they die. And when they die, they create a little, like a hive rash on you. So let's say you got into the lake and there was swimmer's itch that was in the water. You would look like you would have hives all over any spot that had touched the water that was not covered. So they recommend that, yes, you can get in the lake. However, when you get out, that you need to dry off immediately and towel your body down so that you are less likely to get swimmer's itch. So that also goes for the dogs. So if you let your dogs into the lake at the dog beach, you're going to want to make sure that when they come out of the lake, that you towel them dry very well. Maybe even rinse them off and then towel them dry really well, because we all know that a lot of dogs have multiple layers of fur and hair, and in order for them not to get infected and have them scratching relentlessly, they need to be towel dried off. Now, we did talk to a ranger at the park about the swimmer's itch, and her response was that they had some people infected with it, and they just went ahead and put up the sign so that they don't get sued. I don't know why you would get sued for getting swimmer's itch. I don't think that's possible. There's nothing that's really going to happen to you if you get swimmer's itch besides hives, or it could get infected even worse if you were scratching relentlessly at those hives. But I can't imagine that anyone would ever be sued for swimmer's itch. So it was a really odd way to explain why they had the signs up. Now, one of the other amenities that looked really fun was their big shuffleboard area. But like this amenity, like the other amenities, it needed a good sweeping, a good cleaning, get out the leaf blower once a day and get the leaves off of it so that people can use it. Now, the shuffleboard sticks were in really bad condition. Not sure how well you could play with those. Even the discs were chipped, so that area really needs some love. Now, beside the shuffleboard area, there were a lot of picnic tables, there was some grills, and there was even a smoker that was there. And so I was really disappointed that even though it was February, the weather was beautiful. We had dry weather, and the fact that we couldn't use that smoker, I mean, it had a ton of branches and stuff in it, and I just think that if it had been clean and we had been available to use that area, we probably definitely would have been using the smoker while we were there. Now, they also have tennis courts, they have a basketball court, and they have disc golf, which is a lot of fun. And if you were in those field areas, you'll notice there are a lot of deer in this area. And it's really fun that even if you can't go down there and use the amenities during the winter, that it was nice to take a stroll and see all the deer hanging out. Now, Lake of the Springs has a playground that is great. It's in great condition and just a really nice, fun area for the kids. And near that, you'll also find horseshoe pits. The problem with the horseshoe pits was, while Dawn was filming, there were people that were looking for the horseshoes and they couldn't find it because they wanted to play. So I believe they had to go up to the office to try to find the horseshoes, unlike the other areas where the amenities, the sporting amenities, had the sporting equipment there, but they couldn't find the horseshoes, and even though they wanted to play, they were unable to. Okay, let's dig into the RV spots and the tent spots. This Thousand Trails campground, when we checked in, they specifically told us that at that time, because they weren't doing the system where they told you where to park or what your site number was, they just told us that we could go find a site, which is normal. And now here we are in May, and I'm recording this, and we have now been in 3 parks that now are completely switched over to the reservation system. But still at that point with Lake of Springs, it was just go find your spot. And she did tell us that we could go anywhere we wanted, but if we wanted to stay in the Thousand Trails area, we could stay in Loop X. And so Loop X was a Thousand Trail area that we headed straight there to see like what those sites were like. She had mentioned that they were more level, and we knew that they would have water and power and sewer, so we just went straight to that section. It's a nice section. It has cabins and yurts and places for RVs, and it's close to the pool. And that's an amenity that I didn't talk about yet, but I wanted to mention it here because if you want to be near the pool and don't want to have a very long hike or walk to the pool, then staying in Loop X is where you want to stay. Now, this pool is not very big. For as big as this campground is, it's a pretty small pool. And it is the bathhouse for the X loop, but it was dark inside and it was really dated, and so we just never used it. In addition to Loop X being right beside the pool, it's also right beside the beach for the lake. And that is amazing. So you basically have the pool right there. You've got a huge lake beachfront area. So it's really nice to be in Loop X. So if you can get in Loop X, that's where I would go. If you want to be near the lodge, clubhouse, mini golf, the kayak, boat ramp, and the dog beach, then you want to be in A, B, or G loop. Those are right around where the registration office is and right where those amenities are. An A loop is the loop that I told you have to drive through to get to the registration office. Now, at the beginning, I told you it was a long drive to get to the registration office. And when you're driving in, you're going to notice that there are loops that you can camp out there before you ever get to the registration office, and that's Loop I and Loop D. Now, they're really far away from all the amenities. If you wanted to stay in those loops, or if you get stuck staying in those loops, to get to the amenities, you're definitely going to want to take a car, or if you have a golf cart with you, that's a great option, or take a bike and just don't take your bike to the clubhouse. Now, long before we were in an RV and traveled around in overlanding rigs, we spent a lot of time in tents. And this campground really does have some beautiful tent areas, so I want to tell you about them. There's one tent area that's beside the registration area. It's just a big, massive field. It's really beautiful. There's a communal fire pit area, and then all of the tent sites are actually tucked in along the forest line. And most of them had electricity, some of them had water, but there was communal water if you don't have water at your site. But it was just a really, really beautiful area. The second tent site area that was my favorite area is down by Loop X, which was the Thousand Trails Loop. Now, in that area, when you just past the pool and the X loop, you'll notice on your left that there's a site and its number is T9. If you can get T9, that is the spot to have. It is right beside the bathrooms and the pool house. More importantly, it is right across from the beach area, and you have an amazing view of the lake. And it's just the most perfect little spot with a little creek running beside it and everything. It really was my favorite campsite, even out of all the RV campsites. Like, combine it all, that was the best site. Now, get a little bit past T9 and you'll notice on the left, if you go up a hill, there is a little area up on top of the hill that had tent sites up there. Now, those are all primitive sites. There's no electricity, no water. I think there might have been one water spigot, if I remember correctly. But you are completely primitive camping up on that hill. But it's still so beautiful. There was one spot that had a view overlooking the lake, and it would just be a great little private hangout area if you had family and friends and you had a lot of people coming in multiple tents, where you could just make it like a whole group family reunion up at the top of that hill, right across from the beach, right by the pool, right by the bathrooms. It just really was an amazing tent area. Now, what I love the most about the lakefront area was how big it was. It was really, really a big beach, and it was roped off, keeping swimmers separate from boaters. And there was a wooded area that had a ton of picnic tables and grills throughout that you could really just in the summer, I can imagine being there, like in the shade, grilling out, enjoying the lake. It really, really was a beautiful spot, if only for the swimmer's itch. Now, I really haven't done any reviews yet where I would tell you that we would not stay there again. But unfortunately, this is the first campground in the Thousand Trails family that I have to say will pass. So we probably, no, not even probably, we won't go back to Lake of the Springs. We don't feel comfortable getting in a lake that is having issues with parasites. So that's not really a lake that we would want to spend our time in and just risk that. We love the idea of the dog beach. I mean, really, that is why we booked Lake of the Springs. We knew that we were there in off season, but we were traveling through the area, and we just thought, well, we're going to stop and stay at this one so that we can see what it's like and possibly book it for summer one year. And after walking through the campground and after visiting it and seeing how they were taking care of the campground and the fact that the lake had swimmer's itch, just not wanting to have our dogs get it, not wanting to have the kids get it, and just making an amazing camping weekend or camping week turn into a week after of having hives and itching uncontrollably, we decided that this just really isn't going to be a campground we return to. However, I feel like it has a lot of potential. It's very big. It has a lot of amenities. I mean, everything that I told you, I mean, that would have been a lot of fun for something to enjoy in the spring or summer. But I just think the maintenance is not there and the cleanliness isn't there. So probably a pretty hard thing to control the parasites with ducks and frogs and whatever birds that are in nature that cause that. But at the end of the day, we know it's probably the dam that causes it because the water is not able to kind of clear out to flush and clean the water. So while I know that in the future we're going to pass on this campground, what I would recommend doing if you really want to stay there is just give them a call, find out if they're really having issues. You know, if it's the summer and you know people are swimming in it, has anybody had any issues with swimmer's itch? Are they having any water issues? And are all the amenities available? Are they taking care of the mini golf? Is the shuffleboard cleared? Are those things that they're taking care of right now that you guys can really enjoy and it's worth the money and the time to go? Then maybe take the risk. But for us, we're on to greener pastures and on to the next campground. We hope you'll join us.